Welcome to the Business Growth Spotlight, where we shine the light and talk with business leaders from all over the world who are here sharing their expertise and wisdom so we can all grow together. I'm your host, Heidi Schalk, and co-founder of HLH Growth Solutions, where we help businesses grow through AI and visibility strategies. If you're new to the podcast, we're excited to have you here with us today. You're in for a real treat. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Benjamin Thiele-Long. So welcome, Benjamin, to the show.
Thank you for having me. Great to be here.
It's great to talk with you. So Benjamin, kick us off with letting us know a little bit about yourself. And you have a book that recently came out. So I'd love to know about that as well.
Yes, and it's great to be here to talk about the book because I'm something of an odd fish, but I think that's what makes the book unique. I've spent half of my career and I trained as a barrister, which for those of you who don't know, it's a UK term and it's essentially a courtroom attorney. That's what we do day in and day out. And I spent half of my career as that, but I've also spent half of my career as a communications consultant. I've been really lucky to work with businesses and business leaders of all sizes across America, the UK, and also in Asia as well. And really the book is something that had been sitting for a while with the different work I've been doing. And a lot of people encouraged me to put down not only my knowledge, but also my approach to training for public speaking, presenting, and engaging with the media into a book. And that's why I called the book exactly what it is. It's how to be utterly brilliant at public speaking, presenting, and talking to the media. And it's a practical guide that really brings all of my expertise, my anecdotes, and my style to bear, but in a way that is really easy to apply for anybody that has any fear of public speaking, to anyone that doesn't fear it but wants to get better at it.
Fantastic. So you were sharing a little bit about your background. You've spent 2 decades as a barrister and advisor to C-suite leaders. So Benjamin, what experiences from the courtroom have most helped shaped how you think about communication and ultimately leading you to write your book?
I think I've been very fortunate in choosing a career and a career path that I did because I wanted to be a barrister from a very young age. I knew probably from about 10 or 11 that's what I wanted to do, and so worked towards it. But in particular, because the bar in the UK is very specifically focused to techniques, I was taught these to become a barrister, of how to speak well, how to present well, how to formulate ideas, how to be persuasive, how to argue a case on either side. And that experience of the training, but then turning it into day-to-day combat, I think is probably the best way to deal with it, because courtroom advocacy is combative. It's not argumentative, but it's combative. You want to put your point across. You have to anticipate your opponent's challenge. You have to anticipate the judge. And what that does, it's a sort of a rigor that trains a muscle that gets you to being persuasive quickly or effectively. And I think that the key point that was most useful when I moved from being a barrister to a communications consultant was thinking about persuasion very readily. You are so aware of it in the courtroom because you are trying to persuade a judge in that moment to agree with you, or you're trying to persuade a jury to come to a decision. And it's very immediate because you're right there looking in the eyes of the people that you're trying to persuade. And in communications, you're also trying to do that, but because you're a bit more removed from the people you're trying to persuade or the outcome that you're trying to achieve, it doesn't sit so readily. And so you can write well, you can speak well, but not really to an ultimate goal. And actually, a lot of my book is focused on knowing your audience, properly knowing the audience, understanding exactly what the outcome is that you're trying to achieve. So you're always working towards that, but then putting it in a narrative way that is compelling and irresistible. I love this word, irresistible. There's a great book that I read as a barrister, and it talks about your legal argument should be irresistible. You want the judge to think there's no other alternative but the one that you put in front of them. And that's the same in business. If you're trying to persuade investors, if you're trying to persuade your team or your employees, what you want to say to them has to be irresistible so they're on your side and they are with you. And I think that's, whether it is a big lesson or a small lesson, either way, it's a really core lesson that I have tried to embody. I try and think about with my own communication style and approach, but also when I'm training other people, what is it you're trying to do? If you can be irresistible, you really are in the right direction.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. It's a great way of thinking about it. Direction to head and lean into and goal to achieve. So there are countless books on public speaking, Benjamin. But as you mentioned, legal rigor is one thing that you had to learn. And so it blends legal rigor, executive advisory work, and humor. So what makes your approach definitely genuinely different from traditional communication advice? Is it the irresistibility factor, or is there more?
I like to think of it as being the irresistibility factor, but the key thing is there's no theory. Let me say that right off the bat. And that's not to say there isn't theory behind it, but the book is not a theory book. And I was frustrated myself looking at books and looking at resources that give long-winded explanations about why you're going to do something. And then you're left going, okay, but how do I do it? Yeah, I've got it. How do I do it? And quite frankly, not all of us have the luxury of time to think about the theory. We just want to focus our minds. So the first thing that was important for me was that the book was very practical in its approach, its design, its layout, and its writing. And sometimes the book just has an idea on a page. That's it. You can read maybe 3 or 4 paragraphs and you've learned something new. And that's why partnering with Lid was such a great partnership for me, because they understood that part immediately. To have that partner in a publisher who says, no, I understand that I could pick up a page and learn something, that is a very unique proposition. I think the second point is I've worked really hard in the editing to give an example every time I'm trying to make a point. So every reader can understand here's how it would work. And either it's a good example or a bad example, so that you can understand the difference. I've also tried to lean much more in the good examples. There is a school of media and presentation training that I've seen a lot of that will give a lot of demonstrations of where it's gone wrong. Good, I've understood the lesson, but how do I not go wrong? Well, I want to not go wrong. And I think there's a lot of people that forget that actually is much more important. So I've really tried to give very good examples of that. I've tried to give examples that are applicable across the board. This is essentially a book written for business leaders, but I use examples from music or from theatre or from literature just to help paint the picture in as many different ways as possible, because we all relate to different ideas. And I think that even though a business book needs to have, that legal and academic rigor that you talk about, ultimately it's how could I explain this in the best way possible? If I can use an example outside of the world of business to kind of click, then that's what I've done. And I've really brought that. And the humor is important. There are so many people that fear public speaking and presenting. And even if you're not fearful of it, the actual training and perfecting and getting feedback is quite daunting. And I've always used humor, both in terms of myself, but in the training room, just to kind of lighten and let everybody know it's okay. We're learning. We're getting there. And those have been some of my most joyous moments when training business leaders, even CEOs of multinational companies. Actually, if we could just laugh about something and realize and then shake it off, it's a huge confidence builder. So I've tried to include that in the book as well for every reader.
Yeah, I feel like humor will allow everybody to don't take yourself so seriously, right? It's a big piece. Like when everything can feel so hard on a day-to-day basis, whether it's what's happening in the world at the current time of whatever time that is, what's happening internally in your life, what challenges we're having, we can sit in that. But when we can lean into humor and maybe not take ourselves so seriously, it kind of gives us a different perspective and a different, then adds a little lightness in our step. And we can also allow other perspectives to come in, other views, and go, oh, okay, maybe I can make this easier. And I love how you had shared about the book, you're simplifying the things inside. You could really lean into legalese because that's your background. And that really wouldn't help a lot of people in business who don't understand that. And I think for many founders or anyone in business, it's important for us to understand that we are the experts in our space. And we have maybe in certain industries, there's certain jargon that we lean into, especially if you're in the technical space or any of those industries. You can really lean into some complexity, a lot of complexity in the jargon, just in the business overall. And if we're sharing that globally or on a wide scale, a lot of people aren't going to understand that and they're going to immediately tune out. So I love how you're reminding us about that, and you're also practicing that in your book as well. So you work with CEOs of multinationals and also startup founders. So what similarities are you seeing between them when it comes to communication pressure, decision making, and being quote unquote on the spot?
I'll actually piggyback off something you just said about the hard work, because what I actually think the biggest similarity is between CEOs of multinationals to startup founders, equally hardworking in different ways. And the talking about what you're doing shouldn't be the hard part. You've done the hard part. And a lot of that actually is about transferring that into just a simple or the most simple way to explain to the audience you're talking to. And I'll give you examples. In particular, in the last company I worked with, the CFO was an absolute brilliant CFO and mathematician. I mean, his mind, the way that it worked was quite extraordinary. He's able to understand finance and financial concepts was extraordinary. But what was more extraordinary to me is that I could be with him for a day and watch him go from talking to investors, institutional investors, to talking to the media, to talking to employees in the same day about the same thing. But the adaptability of his language to those different audiences meant he was always able to land the point that he wanted to make. And I think that that is something that leaders of large businesses have all of this around them to help them do that. People operating and owning their own startups or small businesses that are trying to grow and trying to grow their employees or their customers or their investors don't have that. And what I've tried to do is bridge the gap in between the two, because really the skills are the same. We don't all have access to really expensive media trainers. So how do we kind of convey that? I think as well, there's a very simple principle. It's not mine. I didn't invent it, but it's the principle of Occam's razor, which is essentially is when you strip down all of the fuss and the fluff around things, usually the most simple, bare explanation is not only the truest, but it's the most compelling. And I think that sometimes, and I've seen this, and I've enjoyed this actually working with founders who may have been, working at building their business for years, maybe decades, some of them. And you can see the absolute passion that they have for what they've built, their passion for the team, their sense of pride and ownership. But that then gets in the way of just being able to say in one sentence, I've built this thing, and explain what it is. It comes with everything else, and this desire to put everything out when explaining what you do, rather than saying, let me just tell you what I do, and then I can tell you more about it. So you've introduced the conversation, and then you have somewhere to go. And I think that essentially large business leaders and small business owners have the same problem. Idea rich, time poor. How do we get through that problem and communicate brilliantly and get it in a way that's the easy part? And let's go back to worrying about operating the business and not worrying about talking about it, because we know how to do that, because we understand structure, we understand a bit of the basics, and we understand a bit of how to deliver well. I don't have to worry about that anymore. And sort of coming full circle, again, the reason why the book is not only written but typeset in the way it is very deliberate. There's space to scribble. There are examples to work, and it's supposed to be like a desk side guide that is always with you, so that you don't have to go, right, okay, how do I write my speech again? You can just flip open and go, right, got it. It's that example, or it's that approach. And realistically, none of us are going to get more time. We're only going to get less. So helping people, do more with less is a real achievement, no matter what size the business is.
And I love that your book is actually it's a guide. It's supportive. It's not just full of fluff and theory. Like you said, it's filled with how practical tools. So let's talk about that. Your book focuses on practical tools rather than theory. So can you share one or two techniques that leaders can apply immediately to communicate more clearly and confidently?
Yes, I mean, the first and the easiest is just to think about structure. I would say 90% of people stumble because they simply haven't ordered the points that they want to make in a way that is cohesive and compelling. And it's a sort of a twofold process, but that it's not itself complicated. Sometimes, and I teach this to law students as well, it's the same premise. Just jot down all the things you want to say, all the things that you need to communicate in this meeting, in this message. then look at it and organize it. Do actually three of the points relate to the same thing? Group them. Do the others relate to the same thing? Group them. And put together a really clear structure of, okay, I've actually got lots of things to say, but there's three buckets. Right, now I've got signposting and I know I've got topic A, topic B, topic C. Great. And then look at those and say, well, which is the most compelling? Actually, topic C is the strongest. I should probably start there and then A and then B. It's a very artificial exercise that I've just done, but you can see how in a matter of minutes, you can take a lot of ideas and all of a sudden put them into a very clear structure. And I work through that in different ways. So for different examples, you might want to have fewer points to say, but more anecdotes or examples to bring them to life because you're trying to be more persuasive. Sometimes you might want to wrap all of those points in a story or a narrative arc that follow through. So for example, if you're doing a keynote on a main stage, you don't necessarily want to lecture people, you want to tell them a story, but how you do that and the order which you do that is important. I think also understanding the gear change needed between an interview, a keynote, a pitch, a podcast, a fireside chat, a panel discussion, all of those have the same fundamental principles, but you need to make some changes in order to do that. So again, what I've tried to do in the book is every time you're going to do something like this or you get asked to speak, go back to basics really quickly, understand what that is, and then understand the changes you need to make for that particular format that you're going to speak in. And the third, which I think is really important, and I'm going to come back again to something you said earlier, is about feedback. I think part of the communications profession, if I have to critique it, is the inability to give good feedback. I see far too much, yeah, that's great, good job, and not the honest feedback that's necessary. But at the same time, you also don't want to take new speakers or people that are new to speaking in front of a crowd and go, that was wrong, that was wrong, that was wrong. And all of a sudden it's overwhelming. I go through a couple of different types of feedback and ways of giving feedback that I think are appropriate. And hopefully that's very helpful. And I'm using that example because you just talked about technical language and overbearing things. One of the most amazing things that I witnessed was the Royal Shakespeare Company in London, a professional actors trained theatre company, did a production of Midsummer Night's Dream where they used amateur actors for the mechanicals, the little scene of the people that get in the forest. And these amateur actors were put in a rehearsal room to run the scene in front of people who had been doing this for decades as trained actors. And they ran the scene, and the director right there had a choice to pick it apart and critique it to high heaven, or option B, which is she did. She went to each actor and said, I really loved when you did this. Let's run it again, but do more of it. And go to the second actor. I thought what you did, the way that you reacted to this was really great. Try maybe doing that a bit more. And picked on every performer's strength, highlighted it for them, and said, let's try a bit more of that. And it was transformative. There was nothing critical about what she did, but it was critiquing. There was nothing unkind because there were lots of people. It was supportive. And all of those performers improved because they were given clear reinforcing feedback that they could implement. Those are the types of things that I wish all of us did more of. And quite frankly, it's a technique that's in the book that I want people to use when working with both their own self-evaluation, but also evaluating others, because it can work both ways.
Yeah. So piggybacking off that, because it seems like that's a skill that would be learned, but many people believe great communicators are born. They're not made. And I'm sure that is a skill that somebody taught her. It's not something that just came naturally to her. And if it did, that's fantastic. But for most of us, that's something that's learned. So why is this belief so limiting that communicators are born and not made? And what happens when leaders start treating communication as a skill that they can practice and improve?
I think the answer is the same to both of those questions. I think that we believe it's a talent rather than a skill because most of us are not taught it. Like any skill, you have to be taught or you have to learn it. And I certainly wasn't taught it in school, in secondary school or high school. Nobody gave us public speaking classes or presentation classes. And when I was in early work, no one taught me that. I was fortunate because training as a barrister, I was taught these things. And I think that there is this overwhelming fear that has just mounted from having never done it. And actually, in order to help people and enable people to become good at presenting, you have to very softly and slowly set the groundwork, understand what the skills are, and train them and practice them. It's interesting. It's a very common thing when you see people pitching for new business. One person will suck up all the oxygen because they're not afraid of it and they think they're really good. And actually, the person who's probably got the most intelligent thing to say is kept quiet in the corner, either because someone's taking up too much noise or that person doesn't feel brave enough or able to make a point. That is a disparity that I have seen lose pitches so many times that it is untrue. Whereas actually, what should have happened in the prep for that is looked at what everybody's area of expertise was, looked at what everybody's experience public speaking was, and if person B isn't that experienced but actually can talk to something really important, train them,
Yeah.
walk through them, rep it a few times, give them a good talk track, and all of those things need to come. And I think that that's where business leaders have a responsibility, I think, to their team leaders as they come up the ranks, giving them opportunity to speak to smaller teams and then bigger teams, and then get the mic when speaking with a full company town hall. That's the only route that you're going to get for that person to then be capable to maybe be the next CEO and speak to investors. And it's very common that you see investors get worried, and I'm talking about larger companies on public markets. They get very worried when the predecessor is stepping down and a new leader is coming in and they've never heard that person. They don't know what that person's ability is, not just because they don't know their skill set and whether they can, they just don't know what they think. They don't know what they stand for. And actually, there's a huge merit in business leaders giving room, whatever the size of their company, to those coming up to also share the stage, A, to practice the skill, but B, so you have a backup plan when ultimately you step down and that person is about to take over.
Yeah. And so I want to pause here and actually, like, usually I'll do this at the end, but I want to do it now because we talked about this book and I just want to remind people what it's called, How to Be Utterly Brilliant. And where can they get it, Benjamin?
The book is now available in the UK, Australia, and America.
Okay.
You can get it on Amazon, of course, and at all major bookstores. And it's available as a hard copy and a digital. I absolutely recommend the hard copy because you can scribble on it. But either way, it's good. As long as you have it somewhere that it's portable and you can use, then you can get it anywhere that you like.
Okay, fantastic. I want to talk a little bit about you specifically. You've done a lot. You've pivoted from where you were to what you're doing now. You wrote a book. So can you share with us some of the challenges that you've faced in your journey and in your growth and how you overcame them with launching this side of your business?
Yeah, I think the pivot from law to communications and consulting was a really obvious one to me. It wasn't obvious to everybody else. And it actually was a lot of the skills in this book that, you only see by doing that people understood I was able to perform well in a room and train people and be an asset in that sense, that I was able to get through that barrier. That was hard graft. And the way that I did it was a lot of back to basics, a lot of hard work, a lot of research, a lot of self teaching, so that I could show up with something intelligent to say in the room or as part of the team. So I wasn't just sitting there waiting to be told what to do or waiting to grasp the metal. And that is a skill that I really wish to impress upon people entering their careers, entering the world of work. I had some really excellent mentors at that time. One of the major things that I think is really important, and it comes back to how do you show up at work every day, is preparation. And the first business leader that I had when I moved from law to comms, Mark, he was very good. He taught me a really important lesson that's always stuck with me, and I share it with everybody, is prepare for every meeting as though you might be asked to run it. Meaning, don't assume that because you're number 3 on the docket and someone else is leading, you've got nothing to do and you're just there to take notes. Actually know the agenda, know where the resources are, check the travel, all those basic things, because when something happens, which it will, and you can step up or step in, by God, you will get noticed. And it's not just about your skill, it's about your reliability and the way that you show up. And that was a really important lesson for me to learn, to be taught. And then I realized also I needed some humility. I didn't really know an awful lot about how the media worked and how journalists work and journalism works. So I read, I watched, I listened, I went to places, I met journalists, and it's only that immersive process that you can do that really goes in. And it was the same really when I moved from the UK to America. I mean, two nations divided by a common language. It's quite extraordinary sometimes how, as a Brit, you can be in America and you can say something that you think is perfectly cohesive and in English, and you're not understood remotely. There's a lot about delivery. There's a lot about cultural changes, and again, that was a big learning curve for me. And I moved from London to East Coast to West Coast, and that itself was a big change. You have to be a sponge. You really have to be a sponge. And I think for me, I continue to do that. I continue to learn. I continue to try and learn from other people, and that lovely benefit that I had with the agency career that I had working with large multinationals, but also startups, one informs the other because there is an experience and a market awareness that a multinational has that you can share with a startup as in terms of opportunities and where to go. But there's also a nimbleness, there's an agility, there is a different way of thinking out of the box that you can apply from startups to multinationals that haven't changed the way they work for decades. Being in the middle of that, and it was the chief communications officer at Target, Katie Boylan, and she said this publicly so I can share it. She talked about the role of a comms advisor or a PR advisor. You have this perch. She describes it as this perch because there's no other part of a business that you get to interact with everybody. As the head of comms, you interact with every single part of the business. So you have that luxury of being able to see how all the different parts of business work. So I wasn't spending my time as chief communications officer at Petco just writing press releases. I was learning about the merchandising part of the business. I was learning about the finance. I was understanding about the employee relations. All of those are domains of other people, but I will work with them. I will listen. I think that the more that we can all do that, no matter what stage we are in our career, the better informed we will be and the better decision making that we can make, because an informed decision is always better than a non-informed one.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting clients, let's talk about marketing now and visibility. Yep. Getting clients as a barrister, I'm guessing, is a lot different than getting clients as a business owner. So working with CEOs and in the leaders that you work with. So can you share with us what you've done? How are you getting, I know you have your book, but how are you getting in front of those? Like, how are you getting your clients? What's working for you? And Benjamin, if you don't mind sharing on the flip side, getting a little vulnerable with us, is there anything that you've done that hasn't worked as well as you had hoped also?
The main approach is networking. I'm fortunate at that stage in my career now where I've got 20 plus years of working under my belt that I know enough people that if I don't know somebody I can work with, they know somebody that I can work with. And I am dogmatic about keeping engaged on LinkedIn, in business networking events, going to them, speaking to people. But the big caveat to that is always following up. If you speak to somebody and take an email, or they contact you, follow up. You've got such a short window of time of relevance. Relevance has a half-life. And if you don't engage and follow up in a respectful, timely, considerate manner, someone else will. And for me, that continues to be really important. And I think that also the one synergy that I will say between winning new work as a barrister and winning new work in the corporate sphere is do not underestimate the social part of networking as well. Both of those, going to social events, inviting people to things, going to things, taking an interest in people's lives, families, whatever it is really important. And there are people that I haven't worked with for maybe 10 years, but I still can tell you about their family and their career and what they're doing now. And that takes effort, but it is such an important part of the process you have to do. For me also, particularly in terms of the book, I am myself becoming more comfortable with social media. I am, books are really hard to sell. Don't get me wrong. So there's the book that I have to sell, and there's the consulting work that I have. The consulting work is largely easier. It's not overwhelming, but it's easier because of the network and the ability to do that. Selling a book is much harder, particularly in 2026 when everybody's glued to their phones. Therefore, where do I have to be? I have to be on their phones. And so I'm leaning into social. So that's not only with things like Instagram, where I have more of a presence because I've been involved with that, and LinkedIn, but TikTok is a really important avenue. There are a lot of people that talk about business advice and career advice, so leaning into that is not naturally something very comfortable for me. I'm really good at telling other people how to do it. I'm not so good at then doing it myself. So you have to have a bit of humility. I have to edit my own work. I have to reshoot things that I take. several times to get it right, but that is absolutely worth it because the opportunity that social media has for someone like me when you're talking about more of a consulting work is absolutely vast. So using those is very, very important. In terms of what hasn't worked, traditional marketing for books just isn't really there anymore. And I think, traditional marketing for communications consultants isn't really there. There are so many people in this industry now. You have to know people, you have to really get in front of them and then work the room when you can. And so particularly for me, I've made a rod for my own back by writing a book about public speaking, but I try and do as much public speaking as I can. I enjoy talking about the book. I enjoy talking about the process. And ultimately, I think if people can see me on a stage speaking well, they'll think, okay, well, that guy's obviously got something good to say about being on a stage and speaking well. And I think that's an important part, that kind of say-do ratio, which I love. Are you doing enough of what you say you're doing? If you can do that, that is a really, really good metric of how you're performing both professionally, but also as you grow your own business.
Yeah. So question for you, Benjamin, if I could hand you a magic wand, and thank you for sharing what's working for you and what's not working. And everything's different. Like marketing your services is different than marketing your book, right? And then what you were doing before this as a barrister is different than what you're doing now. So, and I like what you said, like, where are your people? Your people are on their phone. So you're like, I need to be on their phone. How do I be on their phone? So it's just not throwing spaghetti at the wall and hoping something sticks when it comes to let's try this, let's try that. The quickest way of getting success is really going deeper than that and going, okay, who are my people? Who is my target? Because not everybody should be your target. Who is my specific target and where is my specific target spending time? And then when you find out where they're spending time, how do I get there? How do I show up where they're spending time so I can meet them, right? And build a relationship with them. And then that's the key of where you should be spending your marketing energy. Before we get into this question, I was going to ask you, you had mentioned time poor, and I loved how you phrased that because I've never heard it that way. Time is a commodity that we never get back. We can always make more money. We can never get more time or get our time back. And I've heard that, but I've never called it time poor. And I know I'm in that boat. And I know many of us are in that boat. You mentioned being in that boat. How do you juggle handling all of the stuff? You said you're starting to get more comfortable on social media. You spent a lot of time on LinkedIn networking and meeting people and connecting. And also it's important to be like out there socially at events. How, with being quote unquote time poor, as many of us are, how are you making all that happen?
Prioritization is the key. It's so funny you asked this question. My dad was a military man, very much a military man, and I remember, when you're a kid and you're asked to do things and you go, I haven't got time to do it, I can't do it, I haven't got time, I haven't got time. My dad, I can picture him now, would say, make time. And as a kid, that's so infuriating, but he was absolutely right. Making time doesn't mean all of a sudden you've got more hours in the day. It is actually, how do you organize those hours in the day to make them more efficient? And when I talk about idea rich, time poor, I keep a journal by my bedside. Most of my brilliant thinking tends to happen as soon as I wake up. And generally speaking, and I know we're recording this evening, my time, as the day wanes on, my thinking gets less brilliant. I know that.
Pretty brilliant today. I'm just going to say though, you're showing up brilliantly.
So I harness the opportunity when I have a good idea, when I write it down and keeping a record of that. And then I use the weekends really religiously to plan out the week ahead, make sure I've got everything done that I need to do. So I'm not hurrying or I'm not running late or I'm not trying to burn the midnight oil because I haven't taken the opportunity to prep for things. That preparation is really important. Mapping out the week and understanding what are my paid work commitments, what are the social work commitments, where's the marketing, and understanding how I'm going to divide that time. And again, then just prioritizing. If I know that something is very relevant right now, let's say I've got an inbound lead that I probably haven't followed up with as quick as I could, just do that very, very quickly. And I think also the other part is not letting perfection be the enemy of progress. Don't write long emails when a short one will do. Pick up the phone when an email takes much longer. I do that at work all the time. I see things, people ask me for things, they want a response. It will probably take me 15 minutes to draft out a well-considered email, whereas I could deal with that phone call in 3 minutes. I've got 12 minutes of my day back. Do you know what I mean? And it's simple things like that make it more actionable. I would say, in addition to that, is on a sort of a quarterly basis, and I think this is really relevant to a lot of your audience who are building and growing businesses. There is the day-to-day and the week-to-week task lists that I think can get overwhelming. I certainly can. My daily task list, if I look at it by the end of the day, I can be quite depressed at how much I've not done, and that's hard. Whereas if I look at my week task list and actually realize I've done half of it, not the new things, that's more beneficial. So on a quarterly basis, I really think it's important that business leaders or anybody trying to grow business just always look back, and you will realize how much you have achieved over the last 3 months. And actually, that can be a huge motivator. And I've done that recently. I'm not a big one for New Year's resolutions, but recently I actually took time to sit down for 15 minutes and think about everything that I did in 2025. And as I was writing this list down, it was really interesting. And I spent about 50 minutes. At no point did I say I wrote a book. And I thought, hold on, that was an enormous thing. I wrote and published a book within a year, and I hadn't even taken the time to think about that and mark that down as an achievement. That sense of achievement is probably the best self motivator you can to do more in the future. And that's not to burn yourself out, but it's more to realize actually how much your accomplishments can fuel you going forward.
Yeah, I think it's human nature. We can look at everything we didn't accomplish and how far we are behind versus how far ahead we are compared to where we were,
Mm.
and acknowledging and celebrating those achievements, no matter how big or small. Writing and publishing a book is a huge achievement that most people would be like, amazing, Benjamin, congratulations. But as us being the ones that are actually like achieving it, many times we'll set these goals. And once we get there, we've done so much to get there, and we have not celebrated those small goals and wins along
Mhm.
the way. By the
Yeah.
time we do that big, complete that big achievement, that big goal, like you did, it's like, okay, I did it. Finally, what's next?
Yeah.
And it's just mentally, mindset wise, like you said, it's really good to acknowledge all that you've accomplished and realize that you've achieved more than you think you did.
Yeah, and that burnout is really detrimental. That it can get really, I've definitely felt it, that what next mentality. And I don't know if there I love work. Like I'm more than happy to describe myself as a workaholic, and I don't mean that in a look at me how hard I work. I mean that in the sense of I know myself. I sometimes can't put the laptop down, and that is not a good thing. And it will just take one thing for me to look around at my family, friends, life around me and go, hold on, I'm missing it.
Yeah.
I'm missing it. What a tonic that can sometimes be just to put things in perspective. And I really encourage people that there is some really wonderful leadership coaches out there. But one of the things that I've heard, Simon Sinek and Marcus Buckingham are two really good people. They both talk about this in slightly different ways, but we talk about this idea of work-life balance, and actually they talk about this in a better way, which is work-love balance. Are you doing enough of the things that you love? And that can sometimes be work, but usually within work, it's am I doing enough of the building the thing or growing the business? This is a concept that can itself be very sustaining. So it's not a question of am I spending the right balance of my time at work and not at work? It's am I spending the right amount of time that's fueling me, my soul, my heart, that I love what I'm doing at work, I'm really enjoying it, and then I also get to do these other things as a benefit from it, like go on these vacations, read these books, take my dogs for a walk, whatever it is. That's more the balance that I think is sustaining, because to your point, it allows you that time in the day to actually go, no, I will work late tonight because I'm going to get this thing done. I'm going to feel really proud of it. So tomorrow I don't have to. It's not a mathematical equation. It's much more emotional than empirical, but it's so much more fulfilling.
Yeah. It's so interesting you brought that up because I'm reading a book by an author named Grover, and he wrote Relentless and now Winning. I don't know if you've read him, but he talks about the whole what you just shared about that balance. And for people, and he trained Jordan,
Mhm.
Kobe, all the
Mhm.
greats. And he was like, with those people, there is like you can't be winning and also have balance. Like if you think that you want to achieve this, but you also want to, you want to like take time to do this and take time to do, it's like, if you're doing everything, you're doing nothing. So, which was eye-opening to me today when I was listening to it. So I'm like, that's true. There are times, and I always said I gave up work-life balance a long time ago. That whole, because it was taking me down, because I was always feeling negative about myself, like, oh, I don't have that, like, I'm a single mom of 2 kids and I feel like I'm working all the time. And then I realized, you know what, we're going to change that to work-life grace, because if I'm trying to achieve balance, then I'm always failing and I'm not feeling good about myself. I'm not celebrating the achievements. The achievement last Saturday with my balance was, it was a full day at the fair. My son was there with his friends. He got to go off, but I knew he was having fun. And we had those moments, we connected, and they were powerful. So there was no work, right? But that was my balance that day, to make up, to coincide with the other. And I didn't feel bad about shutting my computer down that day. I gave myself grace. And there's other days where it's like, okay, work is going to be consuming today. So like you were sharing, there's where that balance comes in. And we have to realize, like, celebrate. Like I could have sat in it and been like, oh my gosh, I didn't do any work today. I'm building my business. I really need to be focused on this, but I really needed to be out there having some fun too, and bringing that kind of thing into my world to be able to sustain the workload and the growing of the business. So I love what you're sharing, because I agree with it. And my mantra is work-life grace, absolutely. So, you need, and I don't know that I fully agree with the author that was sharing, like, it's not possible. I think there's different versions of it, and you need to be okay with, okay, right now, this is the balance I need, which is 80% work, 20%, whatever that looks like. And I think routine matters. Having a routine in your life and structure, like you said earlier, that word matters. Discipline. People get more accomplished and are happier when there's discipline and structure in place. And that's a whole nother conversation we don't have time for today. But I want to find out from you. So thank you for sharing the balance thing, because I think it's especially for our listeners, I think it's a really important piece for them to think about, so burnout doesn't happen, because I burned out years ago. I burned out. I was on the road to burnout last year. It's a real thing. And if you don't keep it in check, it can come up on you pretty quickly. What are some ways, and like you said, if you don't think about it and you don't check in, do a self-check, you could be missing what's happening right in front of you with your family and your friends. And you don't want to miss that. You want to be you don't want, your kids to look back and go, I never saw you. I never was there for this, but also quality over quantity matters too. Some people, you could spend a lot of time and there's really nothing, no quality there, versus you really get those intense moments. And that's where you're building those deep connections. All I'm saying about that is do what works for you. For those of you listening, think about what everybody's sharing with you, because everybody has different opinions, on it's possible to have it, it's not possible to have it, and find out what works for you. We're all giving you our take on it. If I could give you a magic wand, and I know I need to let you go soon, we're hitting that hour and it's late for you. It's later in the day for you. What if I could hand you a magic wand, Benjamin, and you could wave it over one challenge you're having right now, and you can go poof and take it away? What would that challenge be and why?
I think the magic one would be cutting through the noise, because there are so many people, certainly in the world of business and consulting, that want to say, I can do it better, I can do it better, I can do it better. And I appreciate one of them. If you could just cut through that noise, and I walk into any bookstore and see my book on the front cover. I think that's a slightly trite example, but I think that your question is germane to exactly the topic of the book. It makes me think myself, am I communicating about the book in the right way? Am I thinking about my audiences? Should I actually be focusing on whether they're in bookstores, or as opposed to whether they're somewhere else, or whether I'm working with students? And I think that that's part of that relay. Publishing is very hard, but also I have to remind myself I'm not in the business of publishing. The book is an aid to the rest of the work that I do. I'm really a consultant, I'm a trainer, I'm a supporter, and actually I can agonize a lot about book sales, when actually it's much more enjoyable to think about the startup I'm working with right now that are maybe going to do a sale. It's really interesting to think about this mid-sized company that are at a crossroads and they're not quite sure what their growth strategy is, and we're working through that. The reality is the satisfaction from that far outweighs that I sell 5 copies of the book today, because those other things, emotionally are very rewarding, And so, yes, there's a magic wand, but ultimately, I'm happy with my lot, and I'm ultimately just proud of the book and the idea that anybody could pick it up and it is transformative for them. It changes their career, it changes their business. That's why I wrote this. You know,
Yeah.
I'm very, very fortunate. I really mean I'm very, very fortunate with the training and the career I've had. I've had an amazing career so far, and to be able to share that with people is just a real joy.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing it, because many people like don't take those steps because it's hard. It's not easy to write a book, right? It's a journey. So big kudos to you. The book is called How to Be Utterly Brilliant at Public Speaking, Presenting, and Talking to the Media. And I'm positive that everything inside of this book will also spill over into other areas of your life to support you there as well. And one thing I love is how there are places in the book. It's actually more of a guide and workbook. You can take what he's giving you and then implement and start getting those creative juices flowing and making these things happen right as you're reading it, which is fantastic. You don't need another notebook. You got it right there. So thank you, Benjamin, for putting this together. Can you share with everybody again where they can get the book, which is everywhere, but we want to drive this home. Where can we get the book? Also, how to connect with you and your website. We're also going to have all these links on our in our show notes if you miss what he's going to share with you. But take it away, Benjamin. Where can we?
The easiest place to find the book is online, so Amazon or other online booksellers. It's available in the US, in the UK, and Australia right now, as well as some locations in Europe. That's the easiest place to find it. You can also just go to my website, benjaminthiele-long.com. It's my name with .com at the end of it. That's the site where you can learn more about the book, about me, about my training and consulting services, because I work with lots of businesses across the world, and some of the other media opportunities that I've had. So that places that I've written or appeared have talked about it. So you can also hear and read more about me and my style and my approach, because I think all of that is quite holistic. It's not just one thing. It's this ever evolving approach and way of thinking that comes. So that's the easiest place to find me, and I'm always happy to answer emails, queries. Find me on social as well. I'm looking forward to connecting with a lot of your audience, Heidi, because this has been a really great conversation.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you all for listening. So if you're watching us on YouTube right now, thank you so much. And if you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, we appreciate you. Hit the subscribe button, or if you're on your podcast platform, if you can leave a review, we would love it. That way it helps the podcast share this episode and Benjamin out with more people. If you know of anybody that could benefit from learning about Benjamin, hearing his message today, and reading the book, please share this with them. Please send them to Benjamin's way, share the book with them. This helps us support the mission of this podcast of helping more businesses grow. Too many businesses, unfortunately, the numbers are large of the percentage of businesses that fail within the first 5 years. And our guests here, like Benjamin today, he's out there sharing his book, sharing his knowledge, sharing his expertise to help us support us by being here today on flipping those numbers. So more businesses are thriving when they're starting. Benjamin, thank you so much for your time. Go to Amazon, everybody. Go grab the book right now. Let me pull it up again. How to Be Utterly Brilliant in Public Speaking, Presenting, and Talking to the Media. It's a good one. Go grab it. Benjamin, before I let you go, is there anything that you'd like to share or say that I didn't get to ask you or touch on today?
I think you touched on the most important point, which is all of this is a skill and it can be learned. And if it can be learned and applied, everyone can do it. So what I hope everybody has left this podcast is realizing, actually, this is something that they can do. You've no need to be fearful of it. And actually, it's something that can rocket charge everyone's career and business by bringing this to the fore and really applying it going forward.
Yeah, amazing. And you get to be brilliant at this, just as he's sharing with you, because this is all about you bringing you into it, being authentically you. That's what people resonate. So I'm excited about this book. Thank you for Benjamin for putting it together. I think it's much needed. I think people are scared to get in the media. They're nervous to speak publicly, and to have this guide that's just not just filled with like theory, but you're actually giving them things to implement and to take action on is brilliant in itself. So thank you so much. Thank you all for listening to Benjamin and I look forward to seeing you all on the next episode of the Business Growth Spotlights.